They say compassion doesn't pay rent, but in Seattle's Pioneer Square on rain-soaked Tuesday afternoon, one act of kindness rewrote life, nearly ended another. Tamsin Calder, 22-year-old cafe worker 3 weeks behind on rent, lost minimum wage job for being the only person in a crowded market who saw a fallen elderly woman as human, not content. While tourists filmed and locals laughed, while managers screamed and strangers mocked, she knelt on cold, wet pavement and stayed. Didn't know frail grandmother was protected by a feared Korean-American crime leader. Didn't know helping would trigger consequences that couldn't be undone. Just knew someone needed help. 10 minutes later, black SUV arrived. And Tamsin Calder's life as invisible, nobody ended forever. Before we continue, like this video if you've ever felt invisible in a world that only sees credentials and titles. Share it with someone who needs to hear that courage doesn't require permission. And subscribe so you don't miss what happens when one temp worker sees the truth everyone else is paid to ignore. Now let's continue. They say compassion doesn't pay rent, but on a rain-soaked Tuesday afternoon in Seattle's Pioneer Square, one act of kindness rewrote a life and nearly ended another. Tamsin Calder, 22 and 3 weeks behind on rent, lost her minimum wage cafe job that day for being the only person in a crowded market who saw a fallen elderly woman as human instead of content. While tourists filmed and locals laughed, while her manager screamed and strangers mocked, she knelt on cold, wet pavement and stayed. She didn't know the frail grandmother was protected by a feared Korean-American crime leader. She didn't know helping would trigger consequences that couldn't be undone. She just knew someone needed help. 10 minutes later, a black SUV arrived. And Tamsin Calder's life as an invisible nobody ended forever. The afternoon rush at Groundwork Cafe peaked exactly when Seattle rain decided to make everything worse. Tamsin moved through chaos with practiced efficiency. Espresso shots, steamed milk, orders called over din of conversation, and relentless drumming of water against windows. Her manager Drake stood near the register, watching her like she might pocket a $5. He'd been looking for reasons to write her up since she'd turned down his invitation to grab drinks. The rejection had shifted her from employee to problem. She was wiping the espresso machine when she saw it through the rain-streaked window. An elderly woman, small-framed with silver hair plastered by rain, stumbled near the cafe entrance. Her hand reached for the wall but found air. She went down hard, the terrible certainty of fragile bones meeting unforgiving pavement. The crowd barely paused. Phones rose to capture the moment. Someone laughed. That awful nervous sound people make when witnessing something uncomfortable. Tourists stepped around her like street furniture. The woman struggled to push herself up, confusion and pain written across her features. Tamsin. Drake's voice cut through the noise. Don't even think about it, not our problem. You leave your station and you're done. Tamsin looked at him, then back at the window. The woman had managed to get to her knees but couldn't rise. Rain poured down on her bowed head. A teenager moved past filming, laughing. The choice took less than a second. Tamsin dropped her apron and ran. Rain hit like a wall. Cold, heavy, soaking through her shirt instantly. The woman was trying to stand, using the wall for leverage, entire body shaking. I've got you. Tamsin dropped to her knees on wet pavement. Don't try to move yet. Up close, the woman's age showed in delicate papery skin, in trembling hands. Dark eyes, surprisingly sharp, fixed on Tamsin's face with intensity that felt like being seen all the way through. You came, the woman said, barely audible over rain. Of course. Tamsin shifted to shield her from downpour and filming phones. Are you hurt? Drake appeared in the doorway, face red. Calder, get back inside, now. Tamsin didn't look at him. Phone already out. Dialing. I need an ambulance at Pioneer Square, first, and Yesler. Elderly woman, she fell. Yes, conscious, but shaking. You're fired. Drake's voice cracked. Done. Clean out your locker, and get out. The woman's hand found Tamsin's, grip surprisingly strong. You didn't look away. Tamsin squeezed back, gentle but steady. I'm not going anywhere. The crowd thickened, not to help, but to watch. Phones captured everything. Someone asked if this was going on TikTok. Another wondered if the old woman was homeless, said it with disgust. Tamsin stayed kneeling in rain, until the ambulance arrived, 7 minutes later. Paramedics were efficient, professional. Tamsin stayed until they had the woman stabilized on the stretcher, until those sharp, dark eyes found hers again. Thank you. What's your name? Tamsin. Tamsin Calder. Maeve Kwan. The woman studied her with expression between gratitude and assessment. You're rare, Tamsin Calder. Then the ambulance pulled away with lights flashing. Drake waited inside with her final paycheck already printed. No severance. No notice. Clean out your locker. 5 minutes. The crowd watched with detached curiosity. Entertainment over. Tamsin emptied her locker into her backpack while Drake stood there, ensuring she didn't steal anything. When she walked out into rain again, no job, tuition payment due Friday, rent 3 weeks overdue, Tamsin felt oddly calm. She'd made the right choice, even if it cost everything. She just didn't know yet how much everything actually meant. Or that by tonight, a black SUV would pull up to her apartment building, and her life as an invisible nobody would end forever. Chapter 1. Seattle's Pioneer Square had 2 settings in October: drizzle that apologized for existing, or downpour that didn't care. Tuesday delivered the second kind, rain hammering cobblestones, turning tourists into huddled masses seeking shelter. Inside Groundwork Cafe, the atmosphere pressed thick with bodies. Wet coats steamed. The espresso machine hissed. Tamsin Calder moved behind the counter with practiced efficiency. 22, warm brown skin, hair pulled back, hands moving through the choreography of milk steaming and shot pulling. Drake Sullivan stood near pickup like a manager who'd watched too many videos about commanding presence. 34, perpetually disappointed, his eyes tracked Tamsin with the attention of someone looking for ammunition. She'd turned down his grab drinks invitation 2 weeks ago. Since then, every shift became an opportunity to remind her how replaceable she was. Calder, that mocha's been sitting 12 seconds. Window is 10. Tamsin handed off the drink without responding. And smile more. Customers want warmth. She smiled without it reaching her eyes. The rush peaked around 3:30. The line snaked to the door. Drake positioned himself at the window, scrolling his phone. We're running a business, not a social service. Efficiency. Speed. Profit. Through rain-streaked glass, Tamsin saw Pioneer Square's usual scene. Tourists photographing the totem pole, performers huddled under the arcade. Then she saw the woman. Elderly, late 70s, navigating cobblestones with a wooden cane. Small-framed, silver hair darkened by rain, elegant coat soaked through. She moved carefully, cane testing each step on treacherous stones. The crowd flowed around her, noticed just enough to avoid, forgotten immediately. Tamsin was steaming milk when it happened. The cane caught on uneven cobblestones. The woman pitched forward with awful inevitability. Her hand reached for the wall. Too far. Nothing but air and rain, and hard pavement rising. She went down, not dramatically, just the quiet collapse of fragile bones meeting stone. Her cane skittered away, coming to rest against tourist luggage. The crowd's reaction came in stages. First, nothing. Brains processing the interruption. Second, slowing. Not stopping. Just pedestrians deciding if this was their problem. Third, the phones. A teenager in North Face turned, phone rising. His friend laughed, that nervous performative sound. The kind that means, I'm documenting this for content. Oh my god, she just ate it. The woman was on her hands and knees, trying to push up. Her coat clung to her small frame. Rain plastered silver hair to skull. She moved with trembling effort. More phones appeared. A woman in athleisure positioned for the best angle. A man stepped carefully around, annoyed at the obstruction. Is she drunk? Probably homeless. Another voice answered, tone making it clear this explained everything. The woman's hands pressed against wet stone, slipping, searching for purchase. Show's over, Drake said. We've got actual customers. But Tamsin watched the crowd. Watched students film while walking past. Watched an elderly couple hesitate, then hurry on. Watched person after person calculate that helping wasn't worth it. The woman managed one knee under her. The other leg wouldn't cooperate. She stayed half kneeling, rain pouring on bowed head, while the crowd documented with detached fascination. Seriously, Calder? Customers. Drake moved behind counter. Stop gawking. Tamsin's hands had stopped. The milk overheated. The shot pulling long. The woman outside had both hands on wall, trying for leverage. Her body shook with effort. A security guard walked past, saw her, kept walking. We're not social workers, Drake said. Not our problem. The woman's legs gave out. She sank back to her knees, and something about the defeated curve of her spine, the way her head bowed like apologizing for falling, the way no one was doing anything except watching. Tamsin's hands found the apron ties. Calder. Drake's voice held warning. Don't even think about it. She pulled the apron over her head and dropped it. You leave your station and you're fired. I mean it. Tamsin was already moving toward the door. This is it. Walk out that door, don't come back. Rain hit like a wall, but Tamsin barely registered it. She was already running toward the woman kneeling alone in the crowd. Chapter 2. The rain made everything louder and quieter at the same time. Louder in the drumming against windows. Quieter in the way it muffled the city. Traffic becoming distant, voices turning muddy, even the woman's struggle happening in terrible silence. Tamsin stood frozen behind the counter, watching through rain-streaked glass as the elderly woman tried again to push herself up. Her hands were shaking so badly they kept slipping on wet stone. Around her, the crowd had thickened. Not to help, to watch, to document. A young woman in designer athleisure adjusted her angle for better lighting. A man checked his watch, annoyed at the obstruction. 3 college students stood with phones out. Bet she's wasted. Middle of the day. Sad. The woman managed one knee under her. The other leg wouldn't cooperate. She stayed caught between kneeling and rising. Rain pouring on bowed head, and the curve of her spine held something that made Tamsin's chest tighten. Defeat. Not just physical, but the kind that came from understanding no one was coming. Calder. Drake's voice cut sharp. Counter. Now. Tamsin didn't move. Her hands had gone still on the milk pitcher. Drake appeared beside her, eyes on the customers paying for coffee, not whatever street theater is happening out there. She fell. And? He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Not our sidewalk. Not our insurance liability. Definitely not our problem. She's hurt. Then someone will call 911. That's what phones are for. He gestured at the crowd, at all those raised screens. See? Plenty of people. One of them will handle it. But no one was handling it. They were filming it, making it into a story. Not one person had knelt down. The woman tried to stand again. Her coat was so heavy with rain, it pulled her back down. She got halfway up before her legs gave out, and she sank back with helpless surrender. Counter, Drake said. Unless you're volunteering to lose your job over some random drunk. She's not drunk. She's elderly. She fell. Don't care. He moved to block her view. You know what I care about. The 15 customers waiting. The line backing up. The Yelp review, if service slows down. His voice dropped lower, more cruel. You're already on thin ice. Late twice last week. That register shortage. The attitude problem. I don't have an... You're arguing right now. Drake's smile was thin. That's attitude. So here's the situation. Stay behind this counter, and do your job. Or walk out that door, and don't come back. Simple choice. Simple. Tamsin's mind moved through the math. Tuition payment, due Friday. 3 weeks behind on rent. Landlord, sending terse emails. Textbook she couldn't afford. Credit card for groceries, because checking account stayed empty. This job paid $9, over minimum wage. Had been hard to get, would be harder to replace. She'd applied to 43 places before groundwork called back. Lose this job, and she'd lose everything that depended on it. Which was everything. Drake watched her do the calculation. He had her cornered. Poverty was its own prison, and he held the keys. Smart girl, he said when she didn't move toward the door. Now finish that drink. End. The woman outside tried to stand one more time. This attempt was slower, more careful. She braced both hands against the wall and pushed. Her legs trembled. For a moment it seemed like she might make it. Then her knee buckled. She went down hard. All the way. Hands splaying out. One hitting cobblestones with a small sharp crack that might have been bone. The woman stayed down, not trying anymore. Just down, hands pressed flat, head bowed, rain pouring over her like the weather was trying to erase her. And nobody moved. The crowd filmed. A mother pulled her child around, staying away from strangers. The college students had moved on to filming the totem pole. Tamsin saw her grandmother in that bowed head. Not literally, her grandmother had died 3 years ago. But she saw the age, the fragility, the silver hair, the elegant coat that suggested a person who'd taken care with appearance before the world knocked them down. She saw someone's grandmother, someone's mother, someone who'd lived 70+ years, navigating a world that had just decided she was content instead of human. Calder. Drake's voice held warning. Don't even think about it. Tamsin's hands found the apron ties. I'm not joking. You walk out, you're done. Fired. No reference. And good luck finding another job when I tell everyone you abandoned your shift. She pulled the apron over her head. This is insane. You're throwing away your job for someone you don't even know. Someone who's probably fine. Someone who... Tamsin dropped the apron on the counter and looked at Drake directly. Someone who needs help. There's a line of customers. Someone needs help. Right now. And no one's helping her. Not our problem. Drake bit off each word. We're running a business, not a charity. You want to save the world. Do it on your own time, with your own money. Then I quit. The words came before she'd fully decided, before the math had finished running. Drake's expression shifted dissatisfied. He'd wanted this. Fine. Clean out your locker. 5 minutes. I'll do it later. You'll do it now. Or, but Tamsin was already moving toward the door. "This is it. You walk out that door. You don't come back. Ever. Your final check will be mailed. Don't even think about using me as a reference." The cafe went quiet, customers watching. The other barista stared with mouth open. Tamsin reached for the door handle. "You're making the worst decision of your life. You're throwing away everything, because you're too stupid to understand how the real world works." Tamsin pushed the door open. The rain hit like physical force, cold, heavy, soaking through her shirt in seconds. Water ran down her face, plastering hair to skull, turning jeans heavy. She didn't slow down. The woman was 15 feet away. 10. The crowd parted slightly when they saw someone moving with purpose. 5 feet. Tamsin dropped to her knees on wet cobblestones, heedless of cold water soaking through denim, of stones digging into kneecaps, of Drake still shouting something the rain swallowed. Up close, the woman was smaller than she'd seemed. Fragile. Her hands against cobblestones were liver-spotted, trembling, scraped raw on knuckles. "I've got you," Tamsin said, moving to shield her from rain and phones still filming. "Don't try to move yet. Just breathe." The woman's head lifted slowly. Pale face, lips faintly blue with cold, but her eyes, dark, sharp, assessing, met Tamsin's with intensity that felt like being seen through. "You came," the woman said, voice almost wondering. "You actually came." "Of course I came." Tamsin shifted to block more rain, becoming human shield. "Let me help. Can you tell me what hurts?" "Everything, but mostly my pride." "Your pride can recover later." "Did you hit your head?" "No. My hand. Maybe my wrist." The woman tried to lift her right hand, and winced. "And my dignity, but that's probably not what you're asking." Tamsin's phone was already out, dialing. "I'm calling an ambulance." "Just stay still. Help is coming." Behind her, Drake's voice. "You're fired, Calder. Fired." The woman's eyes flicked past Tamsin to the cafe, then back. "You lost your job." "Doesn't matter." "It does matter. Jobs matter." The woman's good hand found Tamsin's grip surprisingly strong. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes," Tamsin said quietly. "I did." And kneeling in the rain, with a stranger's fragile hand in hers, sirens already approaching. Tamsin understood she'd just changed her life, in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. But she'd made the right choice, even if it cost her everything. Chapter 3. The emergency operator's voice came through tinny against the rain. 911. "What's your emergency?" Pioneer Square, First and Yesler. Elderly woman fell on cobblestones. She's conscious, but hurt. I think her wrist is broken. She's cold, been down several minutes. A phone appeared 6 inches from Tamsin's face, the teenager leaning in for better angle. Camera flash went off. Tamsin shifted to block the shot, one hand holding Maeve's while the other pressed phone to her ear. "She needs help now. Dispatching an ambulance." "Can you tell me, is she breathing normally?" "Yes." Tamsin looked down at Maeve, whose sharp dark eyes were fixed on her face with deliberate intensity. "Breathing fine. She's alert, just hurt and cold. Keep her warm until we arrive." An older woman from the crowd, one of the few not filming, stepped forward with an umbrella, holding it over them both. "At least this." "Thank you," Tamsin said, then into phone. "Someone's providing shelter." "How long?" 7 to 9 minutes. "Stay with her." Tamsin ended the call, both hands now free. "Maeve, can you move your fingers?" Maeve tried. Winced. "Barely." "Then don't. Just stay still." Tamsin examined the wrist without touching, already swelling, skin bruising. Around them, the filming had mostly stopped. The moment had lost its entertainment value. Help was coming. Time to move on. But not everyone had stopped. The teenager was still circling to get different angles. "This is going viral. Old lady falls, nobody helps. Then this girl loses her job to save her. Peak humanity content." "Humanity content," Maeve repeated softly, making it sound like the saddest phrase she'd ever heard. Tamsin shifted to block the phone's view. "Can you not? Public space. I can film whatever I want. You can have basic human decency." Drake's voice cut through. "Calder, are you seriously still out there?" Tamsin didn't turn. Her hands were checking Maeve's pulse, rapid, but steady. "I'm talking to you." Drake stepped from under the awning. "You think you can just walk off and everything's fine? You think there are no consequences? Ambulance is coming. I'm staying until it arrives." "You're staying. You quit, remember? Threw your apron down and walked out during rush." "She didn't quit," Marcus said from the doorway. "You fired her. After she abandoned her station. After she ignored direct orders. Someone was hurt," Marcus said quietly. "Not our problem." Drake seemed to realize phones might be recording and adjusted his tone. Look, I understand the impulse, but we have responsibilities. Liability. You can't just run off every time something happens outside. Tamsin finally looked up. When should I run off? What's the threshold? Does someone have to be dying before it becomes my problem? You should do your job. I did. Just not the one you hired me for. Drake's face flushed. Fine. Play hero. But you're done at groundwork. Completely done. I'll mail your final check, minus replacement cost for the shift you abandoned. And don't think about using me as reference. Okay, Tamsin said simply. The acceptance deflated his anger. He'd wanted her to beg. Instead, she'd dismissed him. Okay, that's all. The ambulance is almost here. I'm not leaving her alone, so yes. Okay. Drake stared, then stalked back to the cafe. Maeve's good hand found Tamsin's, grip surprisingly strong. You lost your job. I know. Because of me. Because of my choice. You didn't ask me to help. I chose to. But you're in trouble now. Financial trouble. Maeve's sharp eyes had cataloged everything. Worn shoes, cheap phone, the wince, when Drake mentioned docking pay, school, rent, doesn't matter right now. It matters very much. You helped someone, and you're being punished for it. Sirens approached, growing louder. The crowd began clearing space automatically. You didn't look away, Maeve said softly. Everyone else did. They filmed, they laughed, they made me into content, but they looked away from me, as a person. You didn't. Of course I didn't. There's no of course about it. Most people look away. It's easier, safer, requires nothing. Maeve's grip tightened. You're rare, Tamsin called her. The ambulance turned the corner, lights flashing. The rain had eased slightly, to steadier drizzle. The paramedics were efficient, professional, asking questions about medical history. Tamsin couldn't answer. They worked with calm competence, and Tamsin stepped back to give room. You did good. One paramedic, a woman with kind eyes, told her. Calling right away, keeping her calm. That matters. Is she going to be okay? Wrist is definitely broken. Possible mild shock. But she's stable, alert. We'll take good care of her. The paramedic glanced at the crowd. The phones. Wish more people reacted like you did. They loaded Maeve onto the stretcher. The older woman's eyes found Tamsin's one more time. Thank you. Then, quieter, almost like a promise. I won't forget. The ambulance pulled away, lights flashing, and suddenly, Tamsin was alone in the rain. The crowd dispersed immediately. Show over. Time to get dry. Tamsin stood on the cobblestones where Maeve had fallen, clothes soaked through. No job, no way to pay tuition on Friday, or rent already 3 weeks late. Her hands were shaking, delayed adrenaline, cold, or maybe just reality hitting. She'd thrown away the one thing keeping her life together. For a stranger, for someone she'd never see again. Marcus appeared beside her, holding out her apron and backpack. Thought you might need these. Thanks. Tamsin took them with numb hands. Drake's being a dick. Drake's always a dick. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. That woman needed help. You helped. That's not complicated. It is when you've got bills due. I know. Marcus pulled out his phone. My sister's restaurant is hiring. Want me to text you the info? Tamsin nodded. Too tired to speak. You should go home. Get dry. Marcus headed back, then paused. Tamsin, that was brave. Don't let Drake make you think it wasn't. She walked home through the rain, 23 blocks because she couldn't afford to live closer. Her shoes squelched with every step. Water ran down her neck. She probably looked exactly like what she was. Someone who'd just made a terrible financial decision, for a good moral reason. But when she finally reached her apartment, when she peeled off soaked clothes and stood under a hot shower until the water ran cold, when she wrapped herself in her thrift store bathrobe and made tea she couldn't really afford, Tamsin realized something. She had no regrets. She'd helped someone who needed help. She'd done what was right when everyone else had looked away. And if that cost her everything, which it probably would, she could at least look at herself in the mirror and know she'd been the person she wanted to be. That had to count for something. Even if it didn't pay rent. Chapter 4. The knock came at 7:43. Precise, professional. 3 deliberate reps. Tamsin had been scrolling job listings in sweatpants, tea gone cold. The apartment was quiet, except for rain. She wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, 2 men in dark suits, both with military posture. One checking phone. The other perfectly still. Can I help you? Tamsin called. Miss Calder? Mr. Kwan would like to thank you for helping his mother. If you could come with us. Tamsin's hand froze. Who? Ronan Kwan. Maeve Kwan's son. Waiting downstairs. Every instinct screamed, no. Strangers who knew her name, her address. Tell him thank you, but it's not necessary. He anticipated that. 5 minutes. To express gratitude. If I say no, then we leave. But Mr. Kwan doesn't typically make personal requests. The fact he's here, in the rain, should tell you how seriously he takes what you did. Maeve had said she wouldn't forget. 5 minutes. He can come up. Quiet conversation into earpiece. Mr. Kwan will come up. 2 minutes later, footsteps. Measured. Unhurried. The suited men reappeared, flanking someone who made the hallway feel smaller. Ronan Kwan was tall, 6'2", with the build suggesting personal trainers. Early 40s, Korean American, charcoal suit costing more than her tuition, dark hair precise, eyes assessing everything. He moved with controlled grace, of complete authority. Miss Calder, thank you for agreeing to speak. I'm Ronan Kwan, your associates mentioned. Flicker of amusement. May I come in? This will be brief. Tamsin stepped back. Ronan entered. The suited men stayed in the hallway. He didn't sit, just stood, taking in details. Laptop with job listings, cold tea, unpaid bills. You helped my mother today. I helped someone who needed it, and lost your employment. A job you couldn't afford to lose. Tamsin's jaw tightened. How do you know that? When someone helps my mother, I make it my business to understand them. He tilted his head. You're 22. Community college. Unemployed. As of this afternoon. Rent 3 weeks overdue. Tuition due Friday. $97 in checking. Maxed credit cards. The precision made her skin crawl. You can't just... I can. And I did. I needed to know if you were genuine or opportunistic. No apology. But I think you saw someone who needed help, and you helped, despite cost. Pause. My mother said you didn't look away. That's rare. It shouldn't be, but it is, which is why I'm here. To make an offer. I don't want money. I'm offering employment. Ronan pulled a black metal card. Kwan Logistics, Supply Chain Management. Legitimate business. Good salary. Benefits. Tamsin stared without taking it. A job because I helped your mother? Because my mother insists, and because I compensate character. He set the card down. Starting salary $48,000, plus benefits. Tuition reimbursement. I don't know logistics. We'll train you. Businesslike. Or decline, and I'll respect that. But Miss Calder, my mother is under my protection, which means you are now, whether you take this job or not. I don't need protection. You needed employment this morning. Ronan moved to the door. Think about it. Call when you decide. But certain things are already handled. What things? He paused. Rent paid through year's end. Tuition cleared. Your previous employer accepted settlement, ensuring his departure. With written acknowledgement, you were wrongfully terminated. Tamsin's breath caught. You can't. I can. And I did. You helped my mother when no one else would. That created obligation. He opened the door. How you respond is your choice. I don't want obligations. Too late. Factual. You became relevant to my family when you knelt in the rain. Welcome to the consequences of compassion, Miss Calder. He left, suited men following. Tamsin stood frozen, staring at the black metal card. 5 minutes. Exactly 5. Her life had been rearranged by someone who spoke about protection and obligation, like they were interchangeable, who knew things he had no right knowing, who'd paid her rent before she'd known he existed. She picked up the card. Cold metal, single phone number. She should throw it away. Should be furious. Instead, she stared at that number, remembering Maeve's sharp eyes. I won't forget. Understanding that helping someone in the rain had pulled her into something much larger than intended. Chapter 5. The envelope sat between them, on the leather seat, thick with cash. For your trouble, Ronan said matter-of-fact, as if offering thousands to strangers was routine. Tamsin stared at it but didn't reach for it. Outside the SUV's tinted windows, Seattle's rain-slicked streets blurred past. You need money, Ronan continued. There's no shame in accepting payment for, I didn't help her for payment. The words came out sharper than intended. Ronan's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. I helped her because she was hurt. Because everyone else was too busy filming to be human. If I take your money, it becomes a transaction. It cheapens it. Silence filled the vehicle except for the engine's hum, rain against glass. The suited men in front kept their eyes forward. Ronan studied her. You just refused $5,000. Was that supposed to impress me into taking it? Most people would have grabbed it before I finished pulling it out. I'm not most people. No, Ronan agreed quietly, and something in his tone made Tamsin look at him directly. You're not. He returned the envelope to his jacket. Then he withdrew something else, a black metal card with a single phone number embossed in silver. Then let me offer something else. A job. Tamsin's stomach tightened. I don't need Quan Logistics. Entry level, but legitimate. $22 an hour. Health insurance. Tuition reimbursement after 90 days. Better than anything she'd earned before. Better than the cafe. Better than the position she'd been desperately applying to, with no responses. Why? Because you're the kind of person who runs into the rain when everyone else stays dry. That's valuable. I don't need saving. You lost your job today for doing the right thing. Most people can't afford that luxury. This isn't saving. It's fair compensation for someone who demonstrates character my company values. Tamsin took the card, studying the embossed number. The metal was cool and substantial. I need to think about it. Of course. When you decide, call that number. The SUV slowed, pulling up to her building. Through the window, Tamsin saw the old brick facade, flickering hallway lights, Mrs. Chen from 3B watching behind curtains. She reached for the door handle. One more thing. Ronan's tone stayed conversational. Your former manager, Drake Hernandez. He's been reported to the Department of Labor for wage theft. Apparently, several employees filed complaints today regarding unpaid overtime and tip skimming. An investigation has been opened. Tamsin's hand froze. Several employees, 3, I believe. Very detailed documentation. Unrelated to you, of course. Their eyes met. Ronan's expression remained neutral, but Tamsin saw the truth beneath. Drake's cruelty hadn't been isolated. It had been a pattern. And somehow, in the hours since she'd been fired, someone had convinced those other employees it was safe to speak up. Unrelated, Tamsin repeated carefully. Completely. Good night, Miss Calder. She climbed out into the rain, the black metal card heavy in her jacket pocket. The SUV pulled away smoothly, disappearing into Seattle's wet streets. Tamsin stood on the sidewalk, rain soaking through her jacket, the same one she'd worn this afternoon, still damp. She looked up at her building, at the flickering lights and peeling paint, at the life she'd been desperately maintaining through stubborn will. The card in her pocket felt like a crossroads. Inside, Mrs. Chen's curtain twitched. Across the street, a figure in a dark car watched, not threatening, just present, protection she hadn't asked for. Tamsin climbed the stairs, each step echoing. Her keys jingled as she unlocked her door, stepped inside to the tiny studio that felt even smaller than this morning. The card sat on her counter, where she'd emptied her pockets. Black metal gleaming under fluorescent light. A phone number. A choice. She didn't call it, not yet, but she didn't throw it away either, because somewhere between refusing $5,000 and accepting a business card, Tamsin had learned something uncomfortable. Doing the right thing didn't end with the action itself. It rippled outward, creating consequences and obligations she couldn't control. She'd helped an old woman in the rain, and now that woman's son was rearranging her entire life, one careful gesture at a time. Unrelated, of course. Chapter 6. Tamsin woke to her phone buzzing. The battery had died sometime after midnight, and she'd plugged it in before collapsing into restless sleep, still wearing yesterday's damp clothes. Now the screen glowed with notifications. 3 emails, all from the middle of the night. All from senders that should have been impossible. She sat up slowly, her studio apartment swimming into focus. Morning light filtered through the single window, gray and watery. The black metal card sat where she'd left it on the nightstand, untouched, undialed, impossible to ignore. Tamsin opened the first email. From Seattle Community College Bursar's Office. Subject, account balance update. Urgent timestamp. 2:47 a.m. We are pleased to inform you that your student account has been credited with a scholarship award effective immediately. The Community Compassion Initiative Scholarship has paid your outstanding tuition balance in full, $1,847.50, and covered your remaining spring semester fees, $523. All late payment fees have been waived. Your account is now current. Tamsin read it twice. Community Compassion Initiative. She'd never heard of it, had never applied for it, couldn't have. She'd helped Maeve yesterday afternoon. Scholarships didn't appear overnight, unless someone created one. For her. Her hands started shaking as she opened the second email. From Greenwood Property Management. Subject, rent account adjustment. Timestamp, 3:12 a.m. Your rental account for Unit 4C has been updated to reflect a payment from the Building Improvement Fund. Your account has been credited. Outstanding balance, 3 weeks, $1,200 paid. Current month $400 PAD. Rent through December 2025, $3,600 PAD. Late fees waived. Next payment due January 1st, 2026. Building Improvement Fund. Another program she'd never heard of. Her rent, 3 weeks overdue, constant source of anxiety, was suddenly paid through the end of the year. 8 months. While she slept, Tamsin's breathing came faster, shallow and tight. She opened the third email with trembling fingers. From Pioneer Square Cafe Management Subject. Staffing update timestamp. 4:03 a.m. effective immediately. Drake Hernandez has resigned from his position as day shift manager. This decision was made following an internal review and is in the best interest of all parties. Resigned. Drake, who'd worked there 6 years, who'd fired her yesterday, who'd handed her that final check with such satisfaction, resigned. At 4 in the morning, Tamsin set the phone down carefully. Her whole body was shaking now, adrenaline flooding through her, even though she was sitting perfectly still. She didn't ask for this. None of it. The scholarship, the rent, Drake's resignation, they'd happened while she slept, orchestrated by people she'd met once. Ronan Kwan had sat across from her and offered cash she'd refused, offered a job she'd said she'd think about, and apparently he decided thinking wasn't necessary. Tamsin stood too fast, the room tilting. She paced to the window, 3 steps, then back. The studio that had felt small before now felt like a cage, not because of size, but because of what had just been done to it. Paid for, secured, protected. Without her permission, she grabbed her phone, read the emails again, looking for something she'd missed. Some clause, some explanation that made sense, but they were clean, professional, legitimate looking. The scholarship had paperwork she could request. The rent payment came from a real fund. Drake's resignation would be documented through HR. Everything legal. Everything above board. Everything impossible to refuse without looking ungrateful or insane. That was the genius of it. Ronan hadn't forced anything. Hadn't demanded she take the job. He'd simply rearranged things, created opportunities, eliminated obstacles, through proper channels she couldn't argue with. The scholarship came from a foundation, not from him. The rent from a building fund, not from him. Drake's resignation from an internal review, not from him. Unrelated, of course. Tamsin sank back onto the futon, her legs unable to hold her. The black metal card gleamed on the nightstand. One phone number. $22 an hour. She should be grateful, relieved. Her 2 biggest stressors had evaporated overnight. She was current on bills for the first time in 8 months. So why did she feel like she was suffocating? Because invisible walls had just been built around her while she slept. Walls made of scholarships and rent payments, and convenient resignations. Walls that looked like gifts, but felt like obligations. Walls that said, "You matter to us now, whether you want to or not." Tamsin picked up the card, turned it over. The metal was cool, expensive in a way that had nothing to do with cost. She could call, accept the job, step into the path prepared for her. Or she could, what? Refuse the scholarship she hadn't applied for? Return rent money that wasn't technically from Ronan? Demand Drake be rehired? All of those would make her look insane. Ungrateful for help she desperately needed. And for what? To prove a point about autonomy to people who'd already demonstrated they could rearrange her life with phone calls? Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The scholarship committee would like to congratulate you personally. Lunch today, 1 p.m., if you're available. Address attached. No obligation. No obligation. The words felt like a joke. Tamsin stared at the message, looked at the card in her other hand, then at the emails still glowing, each one a careful, considerate invasion of her life. She should say no. Draw a line, make it clear she didn't want help she hadn't asked for. But the tuition was already paid. The rent already current. Drake had already resigned. The help had already happened. The walls had already been built. All that was left was deciding whether to acknowledge them or pretend she didn't see them closing in. Tamsin set the phone down, placed the card back on the nightstand, walked to her tiny bathroom, turned on the shower. In the mirror, she looked exhausted. Dark circles. Hair still damp from yesterday's rain. Same worn t-shirt she'd slept in. The same person who'd knelt on wet pavement to help a fallen woman. Except she wasn't the same anymore. That person had been invisible, struggling, but autonomous, poor but free. This person, the one staring back, had been seen, noticed, deemed valuable enough to protect, to help, to compensate. Tamsin stepped into the shower, let hot water wash away yesterday's rain. But it couldn't wash away the feeling that her life had just been carefully, considerately, irrevocably rearranged. The black metal card would still be sitting on her nightstand when she got out, and she still wouldn't call it. Not yet. But not yet was starting to feel less like defiance and more like delay. Less like maintaining boundaries and more like postponing the inevitable. Because Ronan Kwan had already demonstrated something important, he didn't need her to call the number to change her life. He could do that just fine without her permission. Chapter 7. 2 weeks after the emails, Tamsin was working retail at a clothing store in Capitol Hill. $12 an hour, no tips, irregular hours that made studying nearly impossible. But the manager had hired her on the spot, no questions asked. She hadn't called the number on the black metal card, hadn't responded to the lunch invitation, hadn't acknowledged the scholarship beyond a terse thank you email. If Ronan Kwan noticed her silence, he didn't show it. No follow-up calls, no additional emails, no black SUVs. For 2 weeks, Tamsin almost convinced herself she'd imagined the weight of his attention. Then she noticed the car, black sedan, late model, tinted windows. It appeared the first night she worked closing shift, idling 2 cars back from the bus stop where she waited at 11:30. She'd dismissed it. Seattle was full of cars. The second night, same car, same position, different street, same stop, but unmistakably the same vehicle. She'd memorized the plate, WKN 4721. The third night, she'd had enough. Instead of boarding the bus, she walked directly toward the sedan. Her heart hammered, but she kept her pace steady. If someone was following her, she wanted to know who and why. The window rolled down. A man sat in the driver's seat, late 30s, lean, sharp eyes that tracked her with professional assessment. Dark jacket, earpiece, hands visible on the wheel. "Can I help you?" His voice was calm, polite. "You can explain why you've been following me for 3 nights. Because you're protected now." The words landed with casual certainty, as if he'd stated an obvious fact. Protected from what? By whom? "I didn't ask for protection. You helped Maeve Kwan. That means you're under our watch whether you want it or not." "Your watch? Whose our?" A voice came from behind her. "Mine." Tamsin spun. Ronan Kwan stepped from the shadows near the storefront, as if he'd been waiting the entire time. Dark overcoat, over charcoal suit, expensive, and understated. "You've been following me for 2 weeks. Edric has." Ronan gestured toward the sedan driver. "I've been checking in. This is stalking. This is protection. My mother cared enough about you to ask after your well-being. I honor her requests. By spying on me? By ensuring nothing happens to the person who helped her." He stepped closer, intense. "You think your tuition being paid was kindness? It was gratitude. Rent being cleared was acknowledgement. But this," he gestured to Edric the street, "this is necessity." Tamsin's stomach dropped. "Why?" "Because word got out." "What word?" Ronan studied her. Behind them, Capitol Hill continued its late-night rhythm. Pedestrians passing. Cars moving through rain. Distant music from a bar. "That you helped my mother. That I thanked you personally. That I took an interest." His voice stayed level. "In my world, Miss Calder, that makes you valuable. And valuable things attract danger." "What kind of danger?" "The kind that Edric prevents. People who might think you have information. People who might see you as leverage. People who would use you to get to me, to my mother, or to prove a point about territory." Tamsin felt cold, despite her jacket. "I don't know anything. I'm nobody. I just helped an old woman who fell." "You stopped being nobody the moment you didn't look away." Something in Ronan's expression softened. "I understand this feels invasive, but my mother wants to see you again. She's been asking, insisting actually." "So this is an escort service to a dinner party?" "It's an invitation, and an assurance, you'll arrive safely." Ronan pulled an envelope from his coat. Cream paper, handwritten address. "Tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock. Edric will drive you. You'll be home by 9. Tamsin stared at it. "What if I say no?" "Then I'll tell my mother you declined, and she'll be disappointed but understanding. But the protection won't stop. That's not negotiable anymore." "Why not?" "Because the danger doesn't care whether you accept dinner invitations. It only cares that you matter to people it wants to hurt." He held the envelope steady. "At least if you come, you'll understand why Edric follows you home. Why your safety became my responsibility." Behind them, a bus pulled up, the one she should have been on. The doors opened, closed, and it pulled away. She'd missed it. "Just dinner?" Tamsin asked quietly. "Just dinner. No strings beyond showing up and being yourself. My mother genuinely likes you, that's all." Tamsin thought about the black card on her nightstand, still uncalled. About invisible walls built while she slept. About Edric watching her walk to bus stops, protecting her from danger she didn't understand. She took the envelope. "One dinner, and then you tell me the truth about what valuable actually means." Ronan's expression shifted into something like respect. "Deal." He turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, most people would have taken the easier path. The job, the money, the security. You chose the harder way, working retail, refusing to call. That stubbornness is admirable, but it won't change that you're protected now. So I'm trapped. You're seen. There's a difference. Being seen means you matter. Being trapped means you have no choices. Tomorrow, you can choose whether to come, Whether to accept what's offered, or keep working retail, while Edric makes sure you get home. Both are choices. He walked away, into the Seattle night. After a moment, Edric's window rolled up and the sedan pulled away. Tamsin stood alone at the bus stop, the envelope heavy in her hands. She opened it. The handwriting was shaky, but elegant. Age and education, and arthritis. Dear Tamsin, I'm told you've been working very hard. Too hard, perhaps. I would very much like to see you again, to say thank you properly, over a meal that doesn't come from a microwave. My son tells me you're stubborn. Good. I like stubborn. It means you have spine. Please come to dinner. Just dinner. Just conversation. Just an old woman who wants to know the young woman who stayed. Asterisk. Maeve Tamsin read it twice, then folded it carefully into her jacket pocket, next to her dead phone and empty wallet. The next bus wouldn't arrive for 20 minutes. She started walking instead, 2 miles to her apartment, through Seattle's drizzle. Edric's sedan reappeared 2 blocks later, following at a discreet distance. Tamsin didn't confront him again. Just walked, letting rain soak through her jacket, feeling the weight of being seen in a world where she'd spent years trying to stay invisible. Tomorrow she'd go to dinner, not because she accepted the protection, or the surveillance, or the walls, but because an old woman with shaky handwriting had asked nicely. And because somewhere under the anger and fear, Tamsin still believed that compassion, both giving it and receiving it, mattered more than pride. Chapter 8. Edric arrived at 6:30. Tamsin wore her only dress, simple navy blue from her grandmother's funeral 3 years ago. It still fit, mostly. The sedan was exactly as she remembered. Edric held the door with professional courtesy, just a slight nod, and Miss called her as she climbed in. The drive took 40 minutes, winding out of Seattle into wooded suburbs that gradually became more isolated, more expensive, more secured. Chain-link fences gave way to stone walls, apartments to estates hidden behind gates. They turned onto a private road. The gate opened before they reached it, cameras tracking. Through trees, Tamsin glimpsed the house, modern architecture softened by Pacific Northwest woods, clean lines, and floor-to-ceiling windows. The front door opened before she reached it. A woman in her 50s smiled professionally, took Tamsin's worn coat, gestured her through a foyer that was elegant and understated. The dining room was smaller than expected. Intimate. A table set for 3, windows overlooking dark woods, candles lit, classical music playing softly. Maeve sat at one end, and Tamsin felt relief. The old woman looked exactly as she had on wet pavement, small frame, silver hair, dark observant eyes. But here, in her own home, she seemed more substantial, less fragile. Tamsin. You came. I wasn't entirely sure you would. You asked nicely. My son tells me you've been difficult. Refusing help, working retail, ignoring his generous offers. Maeve's eyes sparkled. I like difficult. It means you have spine. Ronan stood near the windows with wine, wearing slacks and a sweater. He looked different here, less severe, more relaxed. Thank you for coming, he said. You said I'd be home by 9. That gives us 2 hours. Maeve laughed. Oh, I like her. Ronan, stop looming. Sit. I'm making sure the perimeter is secure. The perimeter has been secure since 1987. Sit. He sat. Tamsin found herself smiling despite nerves. Dinner was simple. Salmon, roasted vegetables, rice, nothing fancy. The kind of meal someone's grandmother would make. Tell me about yourself, Maeve said. My son's reports are thorough but leave out everything interesting. What would you like to know? Family. Ronan mentioned you were raised by your grandmother? Yes. My parents died when I was young. Car accident. My grandmother took me in until I was 19. And then? She died. Heart attack. Very sudden. The words came out flat, factual. I've been on my own since. That must have been difficult. It was necessary. She taught me to take care of myself. But lonely, Maeve said quietly. Not a question. Tamsin didn't answer. Across the table, Ronan watched with that assessing look, but gentler. What are you studying? Business administration. Community college. I was planning to transfer, but the scholarship had paid this semester. Beyond that, everything was uncertain. But now you're not sure. Because accepting help feels like obligation. Yes. I understand that impulse. My family came to this country with nothing. Pride and self-sufficiency runs deep. Maeve took a delicate bite. But I learned something. Accepting help isn't weakness. It's wisdom. The trick is knowing which help to accept and which to refuse. How do you tell the difference? Intent. Help with conditions isn't help. It's transaction. Help that comes freely, expecting nothing but your success. That's genuine. Maeve's eyes found her son. My son is many things. But when he helps, he doesn't attach strings. He opens doors, and lets you choose whether to walk through. Tamsin thought about doors opened while she slept. What if I don't want those doors opened? Then you don't walk through them. The job offer sits uncalled, doesn't it? Maeve smiled. You refused cash. Took the card but haven't used it. That tells me you're not easily bought. People who are easily bought are easily controlled. But I'm still being followed. You're being protected. Ronan interjected. Is there a difference? I didn't choose it. You're right, Maeve said before Ronan could respond. That's not fair. But fairness and safety are sometimes mutually exclusive. My son could have ignored the danger. Let you continue, unaware you'd become a target. Would that have been more fair? Tamsin set down her fork. I just wanted to help you. I didn't want anything from it. I know. Maeve reached across the table, her hand covering Tamsin's. That's exactly why we can't look away now. You helped because it was right, not because it was advantageous. That kind of compassion is rare. And rare things must be protected. Tamsin looked at their joined hands. Maeve's grip was surprisingly strong. What do you want, Tamsin? Not what you think you should want. What do you actually want? The question sat heavy. Outside, darkness had settled. Inside, candlelight flickered across faces, waiting genuinely for her answer. I want to finish school. I want to not be exhausted all the time. I want to feel like I earned what I have. She paused. And I want to not be afraid. Afraid of what? That I'll always be scrambling. That I'll never have enough. That I'll end up like... She stopped. Like your grandmother? Working until her heart gave out? Tamsin nodded, throat tight. Maeve squeezed her hand, then released it. Then let us help you not be afraid. Not by solving everything. You wouldn't want that. But by opening doors, providing opportunities, making sure that when you succeed, you're safe enough and secure enough to focus on succeeding. Why do you care? Because you cared. When everyone else was filming, you were helping. That matters. Maeve picked up her wine. In my world, in my son's world, that matters more than you can understand. They finished dinner in easier conversation. Maeve asked about classes, favorite subjects, travel, normal grandmother questions. Ronan mostly listened. By 8:30, Tamsin was laughing at a story about young Ronan, nearly burning down their house. By 8:45, she'd almost forgotten her nerves. At 9 exactly, Edric appeared. Maeve stood, embraced Tamsin carefully. Come again, next week, if you'd like. Or never, if you prefer. But know you're always welcome. Thank you for dinner. Thank you for staying, Maeve said quietly, and Tamsin understood she wasn't talking about tonight. Ronan walked her to the car. My mother likes you. I like her too. The job offer still stands. No obligations beyond showing up and doing the job well. What happens if I take it? You work. You get paid. You finish school with less stress. That's all. And the protection continues regardless. That's not conditional on employment. Tamsin climbed into the sedan. Through the window, she watched Ronan return to the house. Edric drove her home in silence. At her building he walked her to the door, waited while she unlocked it. Inside her studio, Tamsin found an envelope under her door. Inside, a check from Seattle Community Foundation for $500, labeled Compassion Initiative Living Stipend. She stared at it, then set it on the counter, next to the black metal card. Tomorrow, she'd decide. Tonight, she'd just remember what it felt like to have dinner with someone who cared. Chapter 9. Dessert arrived on delicate porcelain, berry tart with cream. Tamsin had just taken her first bite when the night exploded. The first gunshot sounded like a car backfiring, distant, almost forgettable. Her fork paused, confused rather than alarmed. The second shot shattered that confusion. Then the third, fourth, fifth, rapid percussion turning peaceful evening into chaos. The dining room door burst open. Edric appeared, gun drawn. Get down, now. Tamsin froze. Maeve's plate clattered. Ronan was already moving, crossing the space in 3 strides. The first window exploded inward. Glass erupted in a glittering cascade, followed immediately by more gunfire. Tamsin felt hands, Ronan's hands, grab her shoulders and pull her down hard. Her knees hit hardwood. Under the table. Both of you, now. Maeve moved with surprising agility, already scrambling beneath the table. Ronan's hand stayed on Tamsin's back, guiding her, covering her as more windows shattered in sequence, methodical, targeted. The table above them shuddered as something hit it. Wood splintered. More glass rained down, tinkling like deadly wind chimes. Tamsin's breath came in sharp gasps. Ronan positioned himself between them and the windows, his body a shield. Through the chaos, Edric shouted into his radio, rapid Korean punctuated by codes. Return gunfire came from outside, from different positions around the house. The security she'd sensed was suddenly, violently visible. "Stay down," Ronan said, his hand pressed against Tamsin's shoulder, keeping her flat. Beside her, Maeve breathed hard but controlled. More gunfire, closer. Then firecrackers, followed by shouting, commands in multiple languages, chaos just beyond the windows. Tamsin's whole body shook. She pressed her hands against cold hardwood, trying to anchor herself. Then silence, not peaceful silence, the loaded kind, heavy with aftermath. Tamsin could hear her ragged breathing, Maeve's steadier rhythm, Edric still talking into his radio. "Stay here," Ronan said, and started to pull back. That's when Tamsin saw the blood. It spread across his white sleeve, dark and wet, seeping through at his upper arm. "You're bleeding." "It's nothing." But his jaw tightened, pain breaking through control. "Ronan." Maeve's voice was sharp with maternal authority. "Sit down, now. Mother, the perimeter. Edric is securing the perimeter. You're bleeding, on my floor. Sit." Ronan sank against the table leg. The wound was visible now. Not a bullet, a deep gash where glass had caught him. Long and jagged, blood soaking through his sweater. "I'm fine," he said, but his face had gone pale. The door opened. The woman who'd served dinner appeared with a medical kit. Behind her, Edric, perimeter secure. 3 hostiles down. 1 escaped, but won't get far. He assessed Ronan's arm. "You're hit. Glass, not a bullet. Still needs treatment." Edric gestured to the woman. "Min, handle it." He disappeared. Min knelt beside Ronan, opening the kit. "Let me see." He rolled up his sleeve. The gash was deep, bleeding freely. Glass, still embedded. Tamsin felt her stomach turn. "This needs stitches, possibly hospital." "Do it here." Ronan. Maeve started. "Here," he repeated firmly. "We're not leaving until the threat is neutralized." Min nodded, threading a suture needle. No anesthetic, just needle and thread, and Ronan's jaw clenching as she began closing the wound. Tamsin watched, transfixed and horrified. Each stitch pulled skin together. Ronan didn't make a sound, but she could see tendons standing out in his neck, the white-knuckled grip of his other hand. "How bad?" Maeve asked quietly. "Deep laceration, muscle damage. He'll need antibiotics, rest, proper medical attention within 24 hours. I'm right here," Ronan said through gritted teeth. "Then listen, hospital, tomorrow." Tamsin found her voice. "What was that? What just happened?" Ronan's eyes met hers. "Rivals. Testing. Testing what?" "Whether you're actually important to me. Or just a favor." The words hit harder than gunfire. They were shooting because of me? They were shooting to see how I'd respond. Because word got out that I'd taken an interest in the girl who helped my mother. In my world, that makes people targets. You said I was protected. You are. This is what protection looks like. He gestured at the shattered windows. The blood. This is the cost of keeping you safe from people who would use you to hurt me. Tamsin's hands shook uncontrollably. She stared at the destruction. Glass everywhere. Bullet holes. Her dessert shattered. The peaceful dinner had been an illusion. She'd become leverage, currency. Simply because she'd shown compassion. "I should go. If I'm not connected to you, then they'll find you without protection and use you anyway," Ronan interrupted. "You think leaving makes you safe? It makes you vulnerable. At least here, you're defended. I didn't ask for this. Neither did I." His tone softened. "But we don't choose what matters. We only choose how we honor it. You didn't look away from my mother. I won't look away from you." Min tied off the last stitch, began wrapping his arm. "Done. No heavy lifting for a week. And I'm serious about the hospital." Noted. Ronan didn't take his eyes off Tamsin. "This is the reality now. I'm sorry it's not what you wanted." Maeve reached across the glass-strewn floor, took Tamsin's shaking hand. "You saved me, child. Now let us save you. Even when saving looks like this." Tamsin looked at their joined hands, at Ronan's bandaged arm, at the destruction. Outside, voices coordinated. Security teams, sirens approaching, mechanical efficiency of people trained for violence. She'd knelt on wet pavement to help someone, had stayed when everyone else walked away. And now people were shooting at her because of it. "Tomorrow," Edric said from the doorway, "we will move you to a secured apartment. Not a request anymore. Not negotiable." Tamsin nodded mutely. What else could she do? The walls that had been invisible were now shattered windows and bullet holes and blood on hardwood. She was protected. Whether she wanted to be or not. Chapter 10. 3 months felt like a lifetime. And no time at all. Tamsin woke most mornings to Seattle rain, tapping against floor-to-ceiling windows she still wasn't used to. The Belltown apartment Edric had moved her to occupied the 8th floor with security that never slept, and neighbors who never asked questions. Modern. Clean. The kind of space she'd laughed at on rental sites. Now it was hers, or close enough. The first month felt strange. She'd walk too softly, touch furniture too carefully, waiting for someone to realize the mistake. But no one came, and gradually, Tamsin stopped waiting for it to disappear. Quan Logistics felt similarly unreal. She'd expected shadowy rooms, and dangerous men. What she got was the 15th floor of a glass tower near Pike Place, an accounting department that ran on spreadsheets and coffee, and a supervisor named Marcus, who cared about her Excel skills, not her story. Legitimate division, Ronan had said. And it was. She was good at it. Numbers made sense when people didn't. They added up or they didn't, left trails that told clear stories. By the second month, Marcus assigned her complex reconciliations. By the third, other accountants asked her to check their work. "You've got an eye for this," Marcus said, dropping a file on her desk. So she did the work, and tried not to think too hard about the path from fired cafe worker to corporate accountant, paved by kneeling on wet pavement. Tuesdays belonged to Maeve. The estate was 40 minutes northeast, through wooded property that appeared on no map. Edric drove her the first 3 visits. By the 4th, he handed her keys to a modest sedan, and the gate code. "You trust me with this?" "Maeve trusts you," Edric replied. "That means I do too." They played chess. Maeve won most games, but not all. Tamsin had learned to see 3 moves ahead, to recognize when safety was actually a trap. They drank tea from delicate cups that looked like they'd survived wars. They talked, not about business. Maeve never mentioned Ronan's work. They talked instead about Tamsin's grandmother, about grief that hit you months later in grocery aisles. Maeve told stories about growing up in Busan, meeting her husband at a church social, about Ronan as a boy, serious even then, protecting other children, stray cats, her when his father raised his voice. "He was always protecting something," Maeve said one afternoon, moving her bishop, even when he had nothing to protect with. Tamsin studied the board. "Does he still?" "What do you think?" "I think he decided I needed protecting and didn't ask if I wanted it." "And do you want it?" Tamsin thought about the apartment, the job, the security that followed at a distance. "I don't know. I didn't ask for it, but I'm not sure I'd give it back either." Maeve's smile was knowing. "That's honest." Ronan values honesty above almost everything. Does he value it enough to let people make their own choices? He's learning. Maeve moved her queen. Checkmate in 3 moves. Tamsin saw it. Moved anyway, lost anyway. But Maeve poured more tea and started another game. And the ritual felt like friendship that had nothing to do with obligation. Ronan she saw rarely, but when she did, it mattered. He didn't come to the accounting floor. Didn't drop by unannounced. For someone who'd paid her bills without asking, who'd assigned security to shadow her, he was remarkably good at distance. But sometimes their paths crossed. The lobby before dawn. The parking garage on late nights. The elevator in weighted silence. Once, 6 weeks in, they ended up at the same coffee cart during afternoon rain. The barista knew both their orders, handed them over without asking. They stood under the cart's awning, rain drumming above, neither quite ready to leave. "You're settling in," Ronan said. "The job's good. Marcus is fair. And the apartment? Better than what I had. Better than I would have chosen for myself. But you're there." "I'm there." He looked at her then. Really looked. In a way that made her understand why people who crossed him stayed crossed. Not cruelty, just seeing everything. "You could leave," he said quietly. "Find your own place. I wouldn't stop you." Would Edric? "Edric works for me." Then the answer's no. You wouldn't stop me, but you'd make sure I stayed safe. Someone following, someone watching. Rain picked up. A taxi rolled past, throwing spray. "Yes," Ronan said. "That's what it means. No apology. Just acknowledgement." "Why me?" she asked. "People are kind all the time. Why me specifically?" Ronan was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Because you knelt on wet pavement while strangers laughed. Because you refused $5,000 like it was an insult. Because when my mother asked why you helped, you said because she needed it, like there was no other answer." He shifted his coffee. "In my world, everything is transaction. You didn't operate that way. That made you dangerous." Dangerous. To my understanding of how people work, to the idea that kindness is always cover for calculation. His eyes met hers. "So I protected you. Because if you could be that honest in a world this dishonest, you were either extraordinarily naive or extraordinarily valuable. And you're valuable. But not the way I expected." Something passed between them. Acknowledgement that they were both navigating something neither had chosen. Then Tamsin's phone buzzed. Marcus asking about the quarterly report. "I should go." Neither moved immediately. The rain, the awning, the bubble of space felt fragile and important. Finally, she stepped into the rain, no umbrella, walking toward the building. Tamsin. She turned. Ronan was still under the awning, silhouetted against gray afternoon. My mother enjoys your visits, he said. I enjoy them too. Good. A pause. So do I. Knowing you're there. Then he was gone, turning down the sidewalk, disappearing into rain and pedestrian flow. Tamsin stood getting soaked, coffee cooling in her hand, and realized that somewhere in 3 months, obligation had started feeling like something else. Something that didn't have a name yet but might. Given time, and the careful distance they both maintained, she went back inside, rode the elevator to the 15th floor, returned to spreadsheets that balanced or didn't balance. And on Tuesday she would drive to Maeve's estate, and they would play chess and drink tea and not talk about Ronan. But he would be there anyway, in Maeve's smile when Tamsin mentioned her job, in the security that led her through the gate, in the shape of the life built around her. 3 months, a lifetime, and no time at all. And Tamsin was learning to live in the space between what she'd chosen and what had chosen her. Chapter 11. The rain had stopped, leaving Seattle's streets slick under afternoon sun. Tamsin stood outside the Pioneer Square Cafe where everything had started, 3 months and a lifetime ago, and felt her stomach tighten. We don't have to do this, Ronan said beside her. Yes, we do. The cafe looked smaller than she remembered. Same red awning, same menu board, same metal tables where tourists sat with lattes. Through the window she could see the counter, the espresso machine, the line of customers, and behind the counter, wearing the green apron she'd worn every shift for 8 months, was Drake. Not manager Drake, just Drake the barista, keeping his head down in the way employees did when they knew they were replaceable. Tamsin had heard through former coworkers that Drake had been restructured within a week of her termination. Budget cuts, officially. The real story was that someone with power had decided he'd made a mistake that needed correcting. She hadn't asked Ronan if he'd done it. The same week her tuition had been paid and her rent cleared, Drake's employment had collapsed with equal efficiency. He sees you, Ronan observed. Through the window, Drake's posture had changed. He turned away from the espresso machine, said something to the other barista, and when he looked back, his face had gone carefully neutral. Come on, Tamsin said, and pushed open the door. The cafe smelled the same. Coffee and milk steam, and industrial cleaner. The floor was uneven in the same places, the light fixtures buzzing with the same hum. The line wasn't long. 3 people ahead of them. Tamsin joined it naturally, Ronan a step behind, and watched Drake pretend not to watch her. He took orders with professional efficiency. But his hands weren't quite steady, and when the customer ahead of them moved aside, Drake had to clear his throat twice. What can I get you? Tamsin met his eyes. Americano, room for cream. Size? Medium. Drake's fingers moved over the register, but he had to touch one button twice, and Tamsin saw frustration flash before he suppressed it. Anything else? That's all. He keyed in the order, read the total in a flat voice. Tamsin handed across a 20. Their fingers didn't touch. Drake made sure of it. The change came back. Tamsin took it, dropped all the bills into the tip jar, and watched Drake's jaw tighten. Not generosity, just the statement that came from being able to give away $15 without thinking about whether it meant skipping lunch tomorrow. I'll have that right up. Tamsin moved to the end of the counter. Ronan stood beside her, silent, present without hovering. The espresso machine hissed. Drake pulled shots with mechanical precision, poured them over ice and water, left room for cream exactly as specified, fitted the lid with care. When he set it on the counter, he didn't call her name, just met her eyes. Americano. Tamsin picked up the cup. Thank you. Drake nodded, started to turn away. Drake. He stopped, turned back slowly. You told me I abandoned my station, Tamsin said, quiet enough that other customers couldn't hear, loud enough that he couldn't pretend he hadn't. You told me I ignored direct orders, that I created a scene that disturbed paying customers. Drake's throat worked. You were right, Tamsin continued. I did all of that. I dropped my apron in the middle of afternoon rush. I ran outside when you told me not to. I knelt on wet pavement and blocked people's phones and called 911 and stayed until the ambulance came. The cafe had gone quieter, and I'd do it again, Tamsin said. Every single part of it. I'd do it again right now if someone collapsed outside and everyone else just stood there filming. Drake's hands had gone still on the counter. Something moved behind his eyes. You made a choice, he said finally, quietly. And I made one. We both have to live with them. Yes, Tamsin agreed. We do. She picked up her coffee and walked to one of the small tables near the window. The same window she'd looked through 3 months ago and seen an old woman struggling while a crowd gathered with phones instead of hands. Ronan followed, sat across from her, said nothing. Tamsin pulled the lid off her coffee, poured cream, watched it swirl until the color was right. Took a sip. It was good coffee. Drake had always made good coffee. That had never been the problem. Through the window, she could see the spot on the pavement. No mark, no indication anything had happened. Just clean stone, worn smooth, gleaming in afternoon sun. But Tamsin could see it anyway. Could see Maeve's small frame crumpling, the cane skittering, the crowd forming. Could see herself dropping the apron, running, kneeling. Could feel Maeve's grip on her wrist. You didn't look away. Are you okay? Ronan asked. Tamsin turned from the window, looked at him instead, at the careful way he held himself, at the expensive watch, and the scar she knew was under his collar, at eyes that saw everything. I think I am, she said. And she was, not healed. Healing was too clean a word. But okay, present, sitting in a cafe that had fired her, drinking coffee made by a man who'd told her compassion wasn't her job, wearing clothes bought with money earned, because she'd knelt without thinking about consequences. Thank you, she said. For what? For coming with me. Yes, Ronan said quietly. I had to. They sat there for a while longer, watching the market through windows that had watched everything. Eventually they would leave, return to the glass tower, and the spreadsheets, and the careful distance they maintained. But for now, Tamsin sat in a cafe where her life had split into before and after, and she was okay. And Drake worked behind the counter, making drinks for customers who didn't know his story. And somewhere in Seattle's rain-soaked streets, other people were making other choices that would ripple out in ways they couldn't see yet. The world kept turning. The rain would come back, and Tamsin had learned that sometimes the right choice cost everything, and you paid it anyway, and you lived with what came after. Chapter 12. The $20 bill lands in the tip jar with a soft rustle that seems too quiet for the weight it carries. Drake's hands freeze on the espresso machine. He doesn't look up, doesn't meet her eyes, but Tamsin can see the flush creeping up his neck, the way his jaw tightens. 3 months ago, he'd held her final check like a verdict. Now he's the one behind the counter. The one whose hands shake when he sees who just walked through the door. Sometimes the right choice costs everything, Tamsin says quietly, Ronan's presence steady beside her like a shadow that protects rather than threatens. And it's still worth it. She doesn't wait for Drake to respond. There's nothing he could say that would matter now, nothing that would change the fact that his cruelty cost him more than her kindness ever cost her. The cafe smells the same, burnt espresso, and rain-soaked wool, that particular Seattle blend of caffeine and dampness. But everything else has shifted in ways she's still learning to understand. Ronan holds the door for her, rain already starting its familiar drumming on the awning outside. The gray afternoon light catches the scar at his shoulder, just visible above his collar. 3 months healed, but still there. A permanent reminder of the night gunshots shattered windows, and she learned that compassion doesn't just create obligation, it creates targets. Thank you, she says as they step onto the wet pavement, and when he glances at her with that quiet question in his eyes, she clarifies. For not letting me forget why it mattered. It mattered, because you made it matter. His voice carries that same controlled weight it always does, but there's something softer underneath now. Most people would have walked past her. Most people did. Tamsin pauses at the edge of the square, rain misting against her face, and looks back at the spot where Maeve fell. The cobblestones are still there, still slick with rain, still the same uneven surface that sent a cane skittering, and an elderly woman crumpling. The crowd is different now, but would probably do exactly what that first crowd did. Film, laugh, step around the obstacle, keep moving. She'd knelt right there, felt the cold seep through her jeans, felt the rain soak her shirt, felt the weight of Drake's fury and the crowd's mockery and her own certain knowledge that this would cost her everything she couldn't afford to lose. And she'd done it anyway, not because she knew who Maeve was, not because she expected consequences, or black SUVs, or men who knew her rent situation. She'd done it because someone needed help, and she was the only one who stopped pretending not to see. I didn't save her to gain power, Tamsin says, more to herself than to Ronan. I didn't even think about what might happen after. I just thought about her face, how scared she looked, how everyone was treating her like entertainment instead of a person. I know. The certainty in those 2 words settles something in her chest that's been restless for months. That's why it mattered. That's why she asked about you every day. That's why you're protected now. Protected. The word still sits strangely in her mouth. The secured apartment with its keycard entry and cameras. The job at Quan Logistics where no one asks why she started in accounting with no experience. The weekly visits with Mafia, where they play chess and drink tea and talk about everything except the reason they met. But also, finishing her degree without choosing between tuition and rent. The knowledge that if she walks home late, Edric somewhere in the shadows. The understanding that Ronan took a glass shard, meant for her, and would do it again without hesitation, not because he owns her, but because she helped his mother, and in his world, that creates bonds that don't break. But power found me anyway, she finishes quietly. The rain picks up. Steady Seattle downpour that makes the city feel smaller, more intimate, didn't it? Ronan's quiet for a moment, watching rain puddle in the uneven cobblestones. You carry protection. And yes, burden. The burden of being visible to people who notice. When someone shows actual compassion. The burden of mattering to people who don't let go easily. People like you, people like me. He doesn't deny it, doesn't soften it, just acknowledges the truth of what she's learned. That kindness in his world creates currency she never asked to spend. Obligation that runs both directions, and visibility that brings danger alongside safety. She thinks about the dinner, Maeve's sharp laughter over the chessboard, the way she'd told stories about Ronan as a serious child, the normalcy of it, the unexpected friendship that developed, because Maeve genuinely enjoyed her company, the moment before the gunshots when she'd almost forgotten to be afraid, and then the shattering glass, Ronan's body covering hers and his mother's, Edric returning fire. The medic who appeared too quickly to have been coincidence. The blood seeping through Ronan's shirt and his calm voice saying, I won't look away from you, like a promise and a warning, and a simple statement all at once. That night she'd understood. She was leverage now, something rivals could use to test how much Ronan cared. But also, she was protected. Genuinely, completely, in ways that meant Edric following her to make sure she got home safe, meant Ronan taking hits meant for her, meant Maeve texting about whether she'd eaten dinner. Protected not as possession, but as person. I thought I wanted to stay invisible, Tamsin admits, rain running down her face now. Thought if I kept my head down, worked hard, didn't cause trouble, I could just survive. Get through college, get a better job, maybe eventually stop choosing between groceries and rent. And now she works for a logistics company that she knows isn't entirely legitimate, lives in an apartment she's certain is monitored, and visits an elderly woman who used to control finances for a syndicate. Now she has security she didn't ask for, an obligation she can't refuse, and a man beside her who took a wound protecting her and treats that like it's just what you do when someone matters. Now Drake makes her coffee with shaking hands. Now her tuition is paid, and her rent is current. Now when she walks past that spot where Maeve fell, she doesn't think about what it cost her. She thinks about what it would have cost her to walk past. Now I carry both, she says simply. The burden of being seen by people who don't look away. The protection of mattering to people who keep their promises. The weight of knowing that doing the right thing entangles you in lives you never expected to touch. Creates obligations that can't be undone. Makes you visible in ways that bring both danger and safety. Ronan nods, rain darkening his shoulders. He knows about burden and protection. About obligations that run both directions. About caring for someone meaning you can't look away even when it would be easier. They turn away from the square, falling into step beside each other as they walk toward where Edric is waiting with the car. The rain continues its steady Seattle rhythm. Tourists hurry past with umbrellas. Office workers duck into coffee shops. The city moves around them like it always does, full of people who look without seeing, who pass by without stopping, who would film a fallen woman instead of helping her stand. But Tamsin stopped, knelt in the rain when everyone else stayed dry, chose compassion over comfort, chose humanity over employment, chose to see when everyone else was too busy looking. And yes, it cost her everything. Her job, her invisibility, her freedom from obligation and danger, and complicated protection. But it also gave her everything. Friendship with Maeve, security she'd never known. The knowledge that when she looks in the mirror, she sees someone who doesn't look away when it matters. Power found her not because she sought it, but because she showed compassion, when compassion was rare. And now she carries both the burden and the protection of being seen by people who don't look away either. She glances back one more time at the cafe, at Drake visible through rain-streaked windows. At the spot on the cobblestones where everything changed. Worth it, she thinks. Every impossible, complicated, dangerous consequence. Still worth it. Ronan opens the car door for her, rain dripping from his hair. That scar at his shoulder, a reminder that protection runs both directions. Tamsin slides into the warmth, Edric nodding acknowledgement from the driver's seat, and as the car pulls into Seattle traffic, she feels the weight settle. Not heavy, not light, just real. The burden and protection of being seen. The obligation and safety of mattering, the cost and worth of choosing compassion, when the world expects you to look away. She carries it all now, and she chooses it, every difficult piece, because some costs are worth paying even when they change everything. The rain continues falling, Seattle traffic flows around them, and Tamsin Calder, who was invisible 3 months ago, sits in the back seat of a car driven by security she didn't ask for. beside a man who took a wound protecting her, heading toward an apartment that's more secure than free. Visible, protected, burdened, safe, and for the first time in her life, certain that being seen is better than surviving unseen. Even when it costs everything she thought she wanted. Even when it's still worth it. If this story resonated with you, the tension between honesty and survival, the transformation of power through restraint, the way innocence can become strategic armor, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below, sharing what stood out most to you. Was it Aveline's unflinching transparency? Rourke's shift from possession to protection? The way truth became untouchable in a world of lies? And if you want more stories that explore complex power dynamics, psychological tension, and characters who redefine what strength actually means, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. There's much more to come. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.